I've remarked before on how the different things that different first ladies have done, including but especially of the United States of America, leave a lasting legacy. It can leave a very specific and very important imprint on a young person who's growing up while that first lady is in office along with the president. When I was growing up, I had Nancy Reagan. Nancy had all kinds of associations. I remember the DARE program, mostly because I didn't see that I had a need for it. I grew up in the military. There wasn't a lot of exposure to possibilities to do drugs, at least not the kinds of drugs we understood at the time as being drugs. If we're talking about prescription medications, well, healthcare in the military during the 1980s and 1990s was different than it is now. It's one of the struggles I've had throughout my life. But after Nancy Reagan, we had other first ladies. I was actually very, very struck by the first lady we had with President Donald Trump. It was a very important time in America's history to have a first lady who was not born in the United States. My understanding is that one of the major initiatives she took on as first lady was a program that was supposed to deal with cyberbullying, including of young people, but especially young people that were being cyberbullied. It struck me that she was from Latvia. And within the last few years, one of the things that has happened is that Latvia has shut down numerous, hundreds even, of registered crypto commerce establishments that didn't meet certain specifications. This to me was very important. And I was disappointed because I did not feel that the First Lady received the kind of support that a First Lady deserves, especially with a program as important as that at this time in the history of the United States. I'm going to say that because I'm going to read something, and I'm not going to comment on it more, except to say this. When the Department of Justice announced the first list of individuals arrested for the involvement in the activities that occurred at the Capitol building on January 6th of 2021, they announced that 13 people had been arrested. There were specific charges, including charges connected to aspersions cast on them for identification as being within a particular purview promoting a racialized agenda. Today, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there is an announcement that some sort of large-scale sting resulted in the arrest of 13 people, many of whom look white, that were soliciting sex from a minor online. I am going to read from In Re Charity Colleen Krause, writ of habeas corpus, submitted to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in July of 2017. Quote, while at the Salvation Army on the night of April 19th, 2017, Krause was contacted about processing a financial transaction without details, but with specific reference points. She refused to accept and ended up leaving the shelter and noticing that every woman in the shelter, 13 in all, were asleep at 7:30 p.m. She contacted via email a Texas Senator, Ted Cruz, who was alleged to be involved in the transaction the next day, and visited his office to follow up the next week. The night after she contacted him via email, her bag with all of her evidence, including her report, investigation notes, identification documents, textbooks, and school notes, were stolen while she slept on the streets of downtown Houston. She later learned more specifics about this deal, as well as other financial transactions processed through her and as a result of the detention. This deal was a complex scheme aimed at using women in the Health and Human Services Network, youth who had participated in a robotics competition held in 3 cities, including Houston, Texas, and St. Louis, Missouri. The week that Krause was contacted about processing the transaction, in various mnemonic and other associations they might have with political figures to engage in competitive bidding for the contract. The contract was between three companies, including Lockheed Martin and Boeing, to construct 350 TX trainer jets for the U.S. Air Force. Later on, the recent murder of 16 U.S. military personnel happened concerning a KC-130 made by Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is one of the competitors in the contract for the 350 TX trainers that Krauss had been contacted about processing. Boeing, headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, also has a long-standing numerical association with acquiring aircraft named after Native American tribes, including Apaches and Chinooks, using a metric that is directly related to the one involved in the murder of 16 military personnel. Several transactions involving Chinook and Apache helicopters since the late 1990s have involved a sum of some multiple of 13, usually an amount around $130 million. Krauss had been investigating this component as part of her investigation of the criminal enterprise in Chicago. Krauss had researched how an initial offer to build a wing at an airport in Seattle, Washington in the early 1990s for Boeing cost $130 million. Subsequent deals by Boeing with the federal government for the construction of Chinook and Apache helicopters involved the 13 metric. Krauss had researched at the beginning of Boeing's use of the number 13 in securing aircraft deals, dated to a time wherein 13 Marine Corps personnel were killed in a Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft crash at Quantico Marine Base in 1992. Krauss was attending Quantico High School at the time of this crash. That was page 104 to 105.